Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Naomi, and today I want to share with you top three tips to have a more successful crow pose. So crow pose, if you are not familiar, although I'm guessing if you're watching this video, you are, but if you're not familiar, crow pose is an arm balance. It looks like this. Okay, so I sort of look at it as like the gateway arm balance, like it's the one that gets you into all the other ones. So crow pose. Arms are on the insides of your legs, hands are on the floor, knees squeeze against your upper arms, feet lift up. Crow pose. Okay? No big deal. But it kind of is, I think, because a lot of people think you need to have really strong arms or a really strong core to make crow pose successful. And I'm here to tell you that neither of those things are true. Okay? All that you really need for crow pose to be successful is confidence. Now, I realize how silly that might sound. Yes, you do need to have a little bit of upper body strength. You do need to have a little bit of core strength. You do need to have leg strength. But it's not really any of those things that's going to make crow pose happen for you. It's actually the willingness, and this is number one. It is the willingness to fall on your face. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Number one, the number one tip for a successful crow pose is the willingness to fall on your face. Now, if that stops you before you even start, then maybe crow pose isn't for you. But the truth is that in order to really feel like you're capable of doing crow pose, you are going to have to fall. Falling is inevitable. It is required. It is a part of the process. Why? Well, because once you fall, you know that it's totally normal, that the floor is not that far away, and that falling isn't the end of the world. Okay, that falling actually tells you that you got close to being in the pose. Okay, now the idea of falling on your face might not be particularly appealing, so let me make it more appealing for you. Okay, so I have a couple of props with me today. I have a yoga bolster. Okay, it's just a regular yoga bolster, but it's also my crash pad. So place this prop out in front of me. Bring my arms to the insides of my legs, shift forward, bonk, right? I just land straight on the bolster, okay? Just go straight forward into it, no big deal, okay? Now, if you don't have a bolster, you can use all kinds of other things. I borrowed this super cool punching bag from my husband. I don't think it's like a punching pad. It's not really a punching bag, but it's higher up, so it gives me a little bit more height. So I actually don't have to go very far forward to get here. So again, fall, bonk. But the really cool thing actually is because this is so high, I could lean into it, use it, and then try to find my balance. So sometimes using a crash pad, particularly one that's really high up, and I recommend something like this and not a block. Block is much more narrow. I'll show you. To get those out of the way. Block is much more narrow, so if I have the block up there, I'm aiming for a really small target, okay, like really small target. So, you know, I could overshoot it, it could fall, bad things could happen. Okay, so much better to have a wide, large crash pad than a narrow crash pad. Okay, so you are free to use a block if that's all you have, but I highly recommend using a punching pad or a bolster or even like a stack of blankets. And falling, again, is not terrible, okay? Now, the reason that falling is not terrible is that it teaches you to go far enough forward so that you can actually balance in crow pose. So the number one mistake that people make is they don't go far forward enough, right? So I see this a lot. People get really, they're low. They're like, I'm totally ready to do it. And they're like, right? They're not going far enough forward, right? Their arms stay more at a diagonal. Your arms have to be vertical, not your entire arm. Bottom part of your arm has to be vertical. Your forearm has to be vertical. So in order to go far enough forward, and I'm not using bolster right now, but you still could, the arms are on the insides of my legs, and if I go far enough forward, my feet will naturally start to get lighter. Now, I'm not advocating just sort of leaning into the pose like, whee, without any action. But you do want to get to that place where you feel like you could fall, okay? You do want to get to that place, where it gets a little scary, or your feet are really, really, really light and you're not sure what's going to happen. Okay, so number one, you have to be okay with falling, and you have to go far enough forward that falling could happen because you're okay with it. Okay, so that is the number one tip for a more successful crow pose. Okay, now number two has to do with where you actually get your strength in this pose. Okay, now where you get your strength in this pose is from your legs. It's not from your core and it's not from your arms. Your arms provide the confidence. So again, that's much more of a mental thing. Like, you can take a look at my arms. Now, I like to think that I am strong, but that I am not like the bulkiest, beefiest, girl in the world, right? Woman. I am not like, I am not like super buff and entering, bodybuilding competitions. I am strong, but I'm not like above average strong, okay? The tendency is to think that you have to be really, really beefy, really, really strong to get into arm balances, and that's just not true. Okay, what you need is control over your legs and inner thigh strength. Okay, so that means doing poses like warrior two or pigeon pose or, utkatasana, chair pose. That means doing, poses where you're really working your inner thighs to hold you up. Like pigeon pose in some ways is one of the best ones because it takes the same shape as crow pose with your legs. I'll show really quickly. And it's the idea, see, this is the shape of one side of crow pose. Don't worry about the back leg. But if I squeeze my legs in to lift my hands to my hips, that's the same squeeze in that you need. I'll do the other side so I'm not uneven. Okay, it's the same squeeze in that you need in order to lift your feet away from the floor in crow. Okay, so if I'm coming into crow pose, my arms go on the insides of my legs, like I said before, arms on the insides of my legs, hands go to the ground. I'm going to shift my weight forward until my feet feel light, and then I'm going to lift one foot up and squeeze. Now, the more I squeeze in, the more I want to squeeze my other leg in too. And that big leg squeeze is not only what lifts me up, but it's what holds me up, right? It's what gives me, and I'm like looking at the back of my arms, I squeeze so tightly sometimes that my upper arms turn red. That might be a little excessive, but that's how powerfully you want to squeeze in so that you can lift your feet up, right? So squeeze inward and upward, okay? And that upward is really important, again, because a lot of times people stay really, really low, and they're like, oh, I don't know, and there's no squeeze in, and so they don't get to hold it. They might balance for a minute, but they don't get to hold it, okay? Like, it's super important, all right? So your legs provide you not only the strength to lift off, but also the strength to hold the pose, okay? All right, so that was number two. Number three is all in your hands. Okay, now this actually helps protect your wrists and also gives you that sense of movement, okay, so that you are supporting yourself on the ground. Okay, so that last piece is in your fingers. Now, you want to use your fingers to claw the floor. Okay, now the reason that's important is if your fingers aren't really active and they peel away from the floor, you might feel this a lot more in your wrist, right? Like if there isn't as much pressing forward with your fingers and gripping the mat, you're not going to feel quite as much support, okay? You're going to feel like it's really unstable. So if I place my hands on the floor and I grip the floor and squeeze my legs, I can lift up and I can tuck in and I can pull in with my feet and I can find all of this strength, right? So you got to use your hands. So the alignment of your hands really matters. You want to make sure the crease of your wrists are even with the front of your mats. They're not turned in. Okay, now the big tendency is people will turn their hands in, okay? And that doesn't give you a lot of power, right? So if my hands are turned in here and I try to balance, that's not going to work so well. Okay, you want the creases of your wrists to be even with the front edge of your mat, fingers point forward, and you grip the mat, right? Because you can feel the movement. If you're going too far forward, you can feel it, right? If you are not giving enough power with your hands, you can feel it. You can feel it in your fingers because your fingers are so much more sensitive in that way. Okay, so we'll review the tips really quickly. Number one, do not be afraid of falling. You have to be okay with falling on your face. You can use a crash pad as you need to give you support, and you have to go far enough forward that it feels a little scary. okay? Number 2 is you gotta use your legs to give yourself lift off. Okay, so you cannot just rely on that moving forward to hold you up. You've got to squeeze in with all you've got, bringing your feet towards one another and pulling upward. Okay, the last thing is using your hands, using your fingers to help stabilize your foundation so that you feel steadier, so that you feel more clear, so that you feel more supported, but also that you can feel where your balance is. And the placement of your hands matters. So as wide apart as your shoulders, creases of your wrists in line with your mat. Oh, and one more thing, you look forward, okay? You look forward. Why? And that goes with your hands. If I look back, I can somersault. You don't need to look back. You want to look where you're going, okay? And that goes with your hands. So you want to look forward towards your fingers. And that's it. Those are my top 3 tips for a more successful crow pose. I hope this is really useful for you. If you find that these help you, please let me know in the comments below. And as always, thank you for tuning in to my YouTube channel and doing yoga with me on my yoga mat, on your yoga mat, and together, really. If you like what you see, please subscribe so that you get videos like this delivered to your inbox every single Monday, totally for free. And if you want to see something that you are not seeing on this channel, please let me know. Send me an email at naomi@conscioushealthymama.com and I will make a video just for you. So again, thanks for tuning in and I look forward to seeing you on the mat again really soon. Bye.